Hello, friends. Hello, acquaintances, and hello, strangers, potentially. My name is Ava Pearls, and I am back with updates. It's an interesting day in Albuquerque. We have been getting unexpected snow on and off all afternoon. The weather is a little chaotic, but I can't help but love it. I grew up in Los Angeles, and encountering real snow always feels like magic to me. Maybe it is. My wife Shahar and I have had some incredible good fortune in a kind benefactor committing to significant financial support to help us try to land somewhere safe. It is a truly extraordinary act of kindness from one of the kindest people I've ever known. This changes things for us significantly. Now we actually have the capacity to pay for things like boxes and a moving truck and a storage unit and pizza and some kind of temporary place to stay, and also rent for multiple months. If we can find someone with a rental property who would be willing to work with us. My wife and I have bad credit. We don't have formal income, and we're both disabled, but I'm able to be very functional most of the time, as long as I can just manage to avoid exposure to the fragrances and other chemicals that make my own immune system go berserk and try to end me. At this point, I have the relevant diagnoses and I'm on the right medications and I'm taking the right vitamins and I have a good slate of doctors who are willing and able to work with me and help me access the healthcare I need for survival. If I could have had these answers and treatments 20 years ago, my whole life would have been different, incalculably different. Still, even in this timeline, it's clear that I really could be a productive member of society in the ways that matter to me if I could put together a solid plan for a safe living situation that allows me to minimize my exposure to the fragrances, chlorine, nicotine, and other chemicals that make me so unmanageably sick, but which are so very difficult to avoid. I am someone who likes to be useful to others, but I spent a lot of years being too mysteriously ill to be very reliable and feeling awful about it, and being deeply ashamed of myself for not being able to somehow magically overcome the symptoms of my hereditary chronic illnesses. I have spent more than a decade freezing and hiding and avoiding people whose disappointment in me I would be able to detect, even if they were nice enough not to say anything directly about my failings or my failures. There are people I love dearly whom I've gone years without speaking to, often just because I was so ashamed of myself and didn't know how to make anything up to anyone. The shame spirals were so damaging and so readily reinforced that over the years, I built up more and more habits of avoidance, more and more habits of dissociation, more and more habits of freezing. Most of the people I've stopped talking to, I didn't mean to stop talking to, it just crept up on me after I had only meant to take a little time to be in a better headspace before reaching out to someone or responding to a message. I owe so many apologies to so many people, but even trying to do that, now that I feel capable of it, seems like an intrusion. I'm not exactly in a neutral situation, so I'm hesitant to reach out to people directly and risk making things even weirder, since I am currently experiencing an acute housing crisis and trying to find a safe place to live. It feels awkward to be contacting people out of the blue after truly impolite spans of time have passed, even when my motivations for communication aren't necessarily related to my current logistical situation. There are so many dropped conversations and broken connections I wish I had tended to. And it's probably too late for a lot of those friendships and family relationships. But I wish it wasn't. I wish I could go back and change things. I wish I had been brave enough to push through the psychological tangle that made me feel like I needed to freeze and hide and try not to burden decent people with proximity to my existence. I felt like I needed to become a functional and reliable person before I was allowed to try again. And in the face of my failures, I froze and I avoided and I hid. It was cowardly of me, and I have so much regret. I owe so many apologies. I sat down recently to write out the story of my life in a quest to explain myself and why things have become such a mess. And I wrote about 20,000 words of compelling prose in 48 hours. I used to be able to write like that, to get the idea of what I wanted to start saying and to just sit down and write like a demon in some kind of flow state. I could write a 20-page paper on literary analysis in a single day and have it be good. I missed that feeling even more than I realized, and I feel alive again in a way that I haven't for 11 years, ever since I had to leave graduate school after being failed out of the classes where I'd had to take medical incompletes, even though I tried to finish the coursework. That experience was devastating. It shattered my confidence, and it established the pervasive shame spirals that have haunted my life ever since. I stopped writing completely, and until now, I haven't been able to find my way back. After 11 years of this mental block stopping me, I can finally write again. And it actually makes me feel like myself. Writing makes me feel like maybe I'm a real person who could still exist in the world, even after everything. Writing again makes me feel like maybe I'm not a complete waste of resources. I have so much to say and so many interesting stories to tell. And I rather suddenly have a startling amount of confidence that a real future is possible. If, first, I can figure out safe housing for me and my wife and our cat, so that we can finally get back on our feet after 7 years of instability and housing insecurity. Writing out the story of my life was itself life-changing. Everything feels different now, and the hope I have is far more concrete and far less theoretical. And what's more, as I wrote, as I relived and re-examined, I came to realize, and what's more, as I wrote, as I relived and re-examined, I came to realize that my feelings about a lot of things have changed. I haven't spoken to my father or my brother since before the pandemic. And for 7 years, I've barely had contact with my mother. I didn't set out to not speak to them, but I was so overwhelmed with shame at my failures and my uselessness that my temporary avoidances grew and metastasized into lasting silences. One of the last times that I had direct contact with my father, he pointed out that it was hard, feeling like I only reached out when I was asking for help, and then I would disappear again, and he wished I wouldn't keep doing that. It was a very fair thing to say, without malice or vitriol, and I knew it was a fair criticism. I apologized, but I don't know if it made any difference. And then, when I couldn't figure out how to be in contact with anyone without making them uncomfortable by talking about how alarmingly things were going in my life, I just withdrew. I think on some level I gave up on the idea that I deserved to have fulfilling human relationships. I felt like it was too late for me to deserve anything. The last time I talked to my brother, he was nice enough to pay a storage unit bill for me, and then the pandemic started, and I lost hope, and my silences stretched. My mother and I exchange occasional text messages of greeting, but I always keep my distance. In part, though not in whole, because I know that I make her uncomfortable. I think I always have. But she won't admit it. And that's the kind of thing that used to bother me a lot. But it's funny. After 20,000 words of processing the events and experiences and traumas of my life, I found myself seeing things very differently. My in-laws have given me a real sense of perspective. A real sense of perspective. It's easier to understand now, as so much of my complex trauma comes from my complex chronic illnesses going undiagnosed and the associated medical gaslighting, implicitly telling me that I didn't deserve to exist and I must somehow be faking it or imagining myself into illness. Other parts of my life reinforced that catastrophic invalidation, but it all fundamentally came down to the nightmare of being seriously ill while being told explicitly that there was nothing wrong with me and I just needed therapy. I was 17 when a pediatric neurologist said that to my face. My mother was there in the room, and I vividly recall seeing that she looked relieved when the doctor said that. And it felt to me as if what I was seeing was relief that she wouldn't have to keep taking me to appointments and trying to figure out what was going on and arguing with doctors and trying to support me through something complicated. But, she was probably relieved that the neurologist had just told her that I didn't have a brain tumor. I would guess that she was probably relieved about that. But that experience became something else in my head over the years. It became a symbol of how medical access and family trauma were so intermingled. But so much of it was the medical system just spilling over. Even some of the generational trauma. It's the same medical invalidation, especially toward women and girls. I have stories to tell about that, but this is a digression. I thought that I saw in my mother relief, that she wouldn't have to keep bothering with me, that she'd been let off the hook of trying to find an answer for why I was so sick that I couldn't stand for more than 10 minutes at a time for years. My perception of that experience haunted me. I thought she was relieved at being let off the hook about trying to find answers for why I was so unwell. It haunted me. But there's no knowing what I saw on my mother's face or what she was feeling or what her intentions were. We were both being mistreated by a system that cares very little for women and girls, which neither of us had the power to do much about. My mother wasn't complicit with the medical system that was determined to treat me like garbage. She just wasn't. Not being able to work miracles in a system that is designed to not work for people, for patients. Not being able to work miracles under those circumstances is not evidence of a failure to care. And I wish I had been able to learn that a long time ago. By the time I was 20,000 words into processing, I could see that I was going to have to go back and rework everything. Everything I had written so far. because my perspective had shifted so much over the course of recounting the narrative. By the time I was writing about my experiences with, shall we say, indentured servitude and my narrow escape from it in 2019, I found myself operating with a very different framing from where I'd started. There are absolutely people whom I hold responsible for intentionally harming me, but that doesn't really apply to anyone in my family of origin. And at this point in my mental health journey, that distinction is very significant to me. It is possible for me to hold space for my hurt feelings without needing the person who hurt my feelings to be classified as someone I can't interact with safely. I am capable of processing my emotions better than that. Moving forward with complex trauma is challenging, but I find that I can see things with a lot more nuance these days. I wish I had found my way to this point sooner, but I'm here now, and I'm going to try to make some apologies for how difficult I've made things and how reactive I've been. I don't blame anyone who isn't interested in reconnecting with me, but for what it's worth, I am genuinely open to connection and reconnection now, and I'm going to try, and I'm going to be very willing and able to make a lot of apologies. Apologies I wish I'd been able to make a long time ago. So, just consider this a teaser trailer of an apology. I owe better, more personal apologies to a lot of people, and I plan on following through. But for the moment, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I've been a mess. I've been harsh. I've been terribly inconsistent, and I've been unfair. I have things to apologize for. There are a lot of people who deserved better from me, and I hope I'll get a chance to do better by all of them. I am going to try. For right now, I'm focused on trying to figure out housing plans, either short-term or long-term or some combination of both. And I would be profoundly grateful for any help in trying to find potential options, particularly in the Albuquerque area. It's most feasible for me to manage my chemical sensitivities if we have a whole space to ourselves, but we're open to sharing. Ideally, long-term, we would be in a standalone house or one of those fourplex apartments if it has its own separate air conditioning. Optimally, we would have a place with its own laundry hookups so we can bring our washer and dryer that are free of fragrance residues that make me sick. It would be best to have at least one bedroom, and it would be helpful for medical reasons to have at least 1.5 bathrooms. Apartments are harder for me to manage because the proximity to other dwellings leads to a lot of exposure to other people's fabric softeners and detergents and air fresheners and nicotine. So I have a strong preference for standalone houses with a buffer of air around them. Challenging though that may be to acquire under the right terms. The house we've been living in is actually perfect for us, and it honestly breaks my heart to leave, but it's not ours. The owner needs to sell, and we're not in a position to try to buy a house, so we have to move. Unless, of course, and I have to put this out there, just in case, unless there's someone out there with a yearning to invest in some very reliable real estate in a great part of Albuquerque. It's a long shot, I know, but just in case. It's a nice medium-sized house originally built in 1947. Great period details, not too fussy, beautifully updated. Currently worth about $400,000. This house would genuinely be a very sound investment. And if somebody was interested in buying it and renting it to us at a fair rate, that would be absolutely miraculous. That would be, obviously, that would be miraculous, but it would really be miraculous, is what I'm saying. Really, really miraculous. It would fix everything. We could even pay 3 months' rent in advance. Obviously, this scenario isn't very likely, but since it would solve so many problems so beautifully, I feel like I need to put it out there into the world just in case. Just take that idea and just shoo it out into the world just in case someone's like, gosh, that would be handy. And there's some spare space in the room, in the house, so we could rent out a room or two. If somebody, say, commutes from Los Angeles to work in Albuquerque and needs a part-time space here, we could share. I'm just saying, maybe. Probably not, but maybe. If anyone has any thoughts, please contact me. So, yeah, if anybody out there is open to considering that or has any other good ideas, it would mean the world to us. If we can find a way to be safely housed, everything could change at this point. And I would really like to see what we could manage to do if we had the chance. So, more realistically, we are looking for ideas for short-term rental options and long-term rental options in the Albuquerque area, preferably under circumstances that would allow me to manage my environmental allergies by minimizing exposure to fragrances, nicotine, chlorine, and other things that make me dangerously sick. I can gear up with a respirator and wash down all the surfaces in a place to improve things, but carpet and soft furniture are harder to manage, so temporary furnished rentals are rough for me. But we may not have any other options in the short term. If we can find a workable long-term living situation, we would be able to pay multiple months of rent in advance if someone is willing to work with us, and I'm open to work share type situations if that's relevant. If I can manage to avoid the chemicals that my immune system can't handle, I'm actually able to do a lot of things. I'm very domestic. I like to cook and bake and do big batches of food preparation. I can do laundry and cleaning and dishwashing. I have secretarial skills and educational skills and writing skills and sewing skills. I can do childcare and other caregiving as long as nobody objects to my being kind of disreputable, as it were. I can actually do a lot of things, and I can do things more consistently than I used to be able to. Even so, at the moment, I am in over my head with the urgent packing. Shahar's unrelenting chronic pain makes it very strenuous for her to be active for long, and the more she does, the worse the pain gets. And it lasts, it lingers. The effect goes on for days, for weeks. The more she does, the more taxing it is, and it seems to be cumulative. So I'm doing most of the packing myself, and it's not going fast enough. If anyone I know feels up for helping me pack in the next few days, that would be wonderful. I expect that I'll be putting most of our stuff into storage on Friday, and I would be profoundly grateful if anyone could help with the hauling of boxes and furniture then. I have money for the customary offering of pizza, and if I can figure out the logistics at this point, I can pay for renting a moving truck and a storage unit and other things we need. I would be profoundly grateful for any help in figuring things out, or help with packing boxes, or help with taking things to storage, probably on Friday. In the realm of figuring things out, it would be great to have help looking for short-term rental or long-term rental options, especially anything that could make it easier for me to manage my very inconvenient chemical sensitivities. It would definitely make things easier if we could find an unfurnished place that was available right away, not too small, where we could stay for at least 6 months with a landlord who would be willing to rent us a house or apartment, even though we have bad credit and no formal income. We can pay multiple months of rent in advance, and I'm open to work share agreements or other unconventional situations. We have some resources now, but we still need help finding options. And I'd be very grateful for any and all assistance and encouragement as we try to make everything work without falling into utter catastrophe. I'm asking for help, but I also want to mention that I can be helpful to others too. If there's something I can do for you, talk to me about it, please. I'd like to be more useful to the people I like instead of falling into shame spirals and hiding from the world for years on end. Whatever happens next, wherever we end up, I am determined to come through this experience, leaning into connection and community and mutual aid, especially in these dark times we are all living through. Isolation and disconnection are exactly what capitalism wants us to feel, and remembering that helps me keep my priorities in order. Thank you very much for your time, and good luck out there.